Josh Paunil from Birds247 at PhillyMag.com. Josh, appreciate you coming on the show on Friday.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to start with the defense because, to me, that was where some of the biggest moments of highlight for me, and one of them was the fact that these interceptions they had last night, Josh, were not just, I lucked into them, the quarterback stinks. I know it wasn't Roethlisberger. I know Antonio Brown wasn't out there, but you saw the interceptions by guys like Carroll and Grimes. These were playmaker-type plays. So can you talk a little bit about, the importance of having guys who can make plays on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, well, a couple of interceptions really stood out to me. Well, actually, three. But one of them, Aaron Grimes' interception, one of the reasons that really stood out, even though it was the Steelers' third-string quarterback that threw that pass, that play that Aaron Grimes had, first of all, he got beat a couple of plays earlier, and he just did a really good job responding to that earlier defeat when he gave up, I can't remember how long it was, but he gave up a long completion a couple of times before that. But he comes back, he recognizes out of the formation, he sees, okay, based off where the Steelers are in the field and their formation and what I studied on their film, this is the route that I think is coming. And he was exactly right. To be honest with you, I thought he was in zone coverage at first before I saw the replay because he was in such perfect position. It was like, well, if the guy ran any other route, then he would have gotten beat pretty easily. But he knew exactly what was coming. The film study really paid off for Aaron Grimes. He put himself in a perfect position. But not only was he in position, obviously he made the play. And he made an impressive catch. That's probably one of the best catches we've seen from any Eagles defensive backs over wide receivers. So that was a great play that Aaron Grimes made. The Leotis McKelvin earlier in the game, when Leotis McKelvin tipped the ball and Malcolm Jenkins had that diving catch, obviously that's something that Eagles coaches really love seeing just because Malcolm Jenkins played at a high level last year, but one way that he's really trying to elevate his game this season is by finishing on those plays and taking advantage of his opportunities. Last year he did a great job of getting his hands on the ball, but obviously he didn't do a great job of actually catching it once he got there. So the fact that he made a diving catch in the end zone to intercept the pass was definitely a good sign and a reflection of all the work that he's put in this summer. And then Steven Means making some more noise. Last week he got some pressure, forced an interception. This week he did the exact same thing. That pass rush that he's been giving the Eagles has really helped them and really just causes the quarterback to throw off-balance throws up into the air, which really turn into easy balls to intercept for the safeties back in the back end. So even though obviously the Eagles weren't going up against very good players, you could definitely see the things that they've been drilling and working on throughout the spring and throughout the summer come to fruition last night.
You mentioned Steven Means, and also you had Brandon Graham. To me, I thought played a very, very good game. Brandon Graham looks very, very comfortable at defensive end. It seemed like in that 3-4 defense under Billy Davis, he just looked out of sorts. He looked lost. He looked confused. He didn't really know where he was supposed to be. But on that defensive end, I saw it a lot last night. He just looked really at home, Josh.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is, if you talk to pretty much any defensive lineman on this roster, they'll tell you, this 4-3 scheme is finally what I've been waiting for. This is perfect for me. And you talk to all these guys, you're like, okay, it can't possibly be the best scheme for all of these guys. But for a lot of them, it really is. That's really because Jim Schwartz just preaches, as you know, don't put too much on their plate mentally. Just tell them, get upfield, attack. You don't necessarily have to stay in the gap. Just get to the ball, fight through the offensive line, penetrate, cause disruption along the line of scrimmage, and really play to these guys' strengths. And that's what you're seeing last night and even a little bit the week before, although not to the exact same extent. Brandon Graham had a good game. Fletcher Cox, I'm not even sure what his final numbers were last night, but all throughout the first quarter, he just blew up the right guard. I honestly felt bad for that right guard because even though Fletcher Cox, I'm not sure how many tackles or tackles for loss he had, but whenever the Steelers wanted to run either off tackle or in between the guard and tackle or up the middle to the right side, the running back would either have to bounce it outside or cut it back because Fletcher Cox would be 2 yards in the backfield by the time he got the handoff. And it's just, it really is going to be a sign of things to come. Benny Logan also had some good snaps. a penetration of Vinny Curry. There was one play where the right tackle literally tackled him, and he didn't get a holding call, but it was just a really good example of how quick he can get off the edge. And obviously Vinny Curry has always had that skill set, but now the Eagles defensive line, they're learning this technique from the new defensive line coach, Chris Wilson, where you basically explode out of your hips instead of taking a step forward so you can get off the ball quicker, and it's really paying dividends early on.
There were a little bit of negative news last night on the defensive side. Joe Walker's season is over. He has a torn ACL, and it seems like without Walker, the depth behind the starting linebackers really gets thin, and we may be at a point, Josh, where we may have to go out and bring in a couple of guys to help shore up that depth.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen Tulloch has been a guy that I've been trying to keep tabs on because he seems like a former Lions linebacker. He actually played for Jim Schwartz both in Detroit and Tennessee, so obviously he's somewhat of a natural fit with all of his experience. But Stephen Tulloch is a guy that he was reportedly in heavy negotiations with the team as of a week or two ago. But now, with this Joe Walker injury, I think that could really accelerate that process. We'll see if a deal actually comes to fruition. But you'd think that with the state of the linebacking core right now, I mean, you have your three starters, but unfortunately they all have injury histories. They all missed time due to injury just last season. And you have Najee Good, who is a solid backup at Mike and Will, but especially at Sam, the strong side linebacker behind Nigel Bradham. I'm not sure if Nigel Bradham misses any snaps. I'm not sure who goes out there. Are you going to throw an undrafted free agent like Mike Tavares or Quentin Goss out there? So Stephen Tulloch makes some sense as a backup Mike linebacker, but even if you bring him in, again, I'm not sure who's going to be the backup Sam linebacker. So even if you add one veteran to replace Joe Walker tearing his ACL and being out for the season, you might need to add a second one.
Talking with Josh Paunil from Birds 24/7 over at PhillyMag.com, breaking down what happened yesterday during the Eagles preseason game where they won 17-0. One of the things that did happen as well, Josh, was that on the offensive side of the ball, we finally got to see this version of the offensive line they've been practicing with Barbary over at right tackle and Seumalo at left guard. I want to start with Seumalo because I thought there were about 2 or 3 plays that I saw where it just seemed like he was not moving laterally very well. He wasn't moving side to side. He wasn't engaging the block quick enough. Is that one of those things where he's just lacking the reps and the snaps, or is this like a legitimate, I'm a rookie, I'm not as good as I should be situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely more of a, because of the graduation rule and because Oregon State is on the quarter system, he missed a ton of reps in OTAs and minicamp, and so he really is behind the 8 ball getting reps with this offensive line, particularly with the first team next to Jason Kelsey and Jason Peters, of course. But I really think it's just a matter of he's thinking too much because he doesn't have those reps. So he's not just playing fast. He's not just going out there and executing his assignment. When you have not very many reps under your belt because of all the time that he missed, he's really going to overthink things. And really the only thing that can cure that is more and more reps. So even though it hasn't looked very pretty the first 2 games, honestly the best solution is just to keep playing him more in these next 2 games. But I'm really going to be curious to see if they kind of force him into that starting lineup week 1 if Lane Johnson is suspended and misses the first game. Alan Barber will move out to right tackle. But left guard, it's either going to be Isaac Seumalo or Stefan Wisniewski. Obviously, Seumalo has some type of advantage over Wisniewski because he's been getting the reps there. But I wonder if he'll be somewhat overwhelmed or if his head will be spinning because he's obviously just not prepared yet because he doesn't have the reps under his belt.
Speaking of the guy who was the left guard, Alan Barber is now at the right tackle, and I felt he did an all right job. I saw a couple of plays that I wasn't too thrilled about. I saw a couple of plays where he just totally pancaked a couple guys, it seemed like. And so I feel like you kind of walk out of it with a little bit more positives than negatives with Allen over at the right tackle.
Definitely. Well, I mean, the offensive line, not just the first unit, but really first, second, and third team, the offensive line set a pretty low bar for themselves after week 1. But they definitely took a pretty big step forward in week 2. I mean, The Eagles' offensive line only allowed 1 sack, and that was on a naked bootleg where it looked like the Steelers knew a play-action pass was coming. So I'm not really sure that's even on the offensive line because just of how the play unfolded, what the play call was. So obviously it was far from perfect. You definitely want to see more improvement from this unit, but they did take a step forward. Alan Barber, he's not going to be a great right tackle for you, but he can be serviceable. If you can get Jason, obviously this is a huge if, but if you can get Jason Peters to remain at left tackle and play the vast majority of the snaps, Brendan Brooks, I mean, he looks like a good addition, obviously, at right guard. And then Jason Kelsey, I mean, he almost has to take a step forward after his poor play last year. But Alan Barber, he doesn't have to be great for this offensive line to protect Sam Bradford. And I think he showed last night that, you know, he's not going to be a Pro Bowl caliber guy for you, obviously, but he also can help keep Sam Bradford upright.
Speaking of Sam Bradford, he went 14 of 19 for 115 yards. Yeah, he threw no touchdowns, but he also threw no interceptions. And I've been contending today that for me, when I look at this Eagles team, I don't need Sam Bradford to be a great NFL quarterback. If he goes out there and has 3,200 yards, 19 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, this team can still be a playoff contender because he's not putting them in any bad situations.
Well, here would be my counterpoint to that. You really don't have very many weapons at wide receiver, and obviously behind that, Ryan Matthews don't have much at running back. So you're going to need to have Sam Bradford make other guys around him better. I think it's really reflective of how the Eagles view their wide receiver situation, trading for Dorial Green-Beckham. They put in the claim for Rasheed Bailey. Ultimately, I believe he went to the Jaguars, but the Eagles put out a claim for him at wide receiver, whom they cut last year. So I think the Eagles really don't view this wide receiver position very strong. And although I do agree that Sam Bradford, he definitely didn't play poorly last night. He didn't really make any wow throws. Although there were a couple of throws out there that weren't easy to make that he looked easy, but it wasn't necessarily a great game, but it also was a solid game. It was a game that you would definitely take Sam Bradford. But like I said, I do think you're going to have to see him make guys around him better just because of how thin they are in terms of talent at receiver.
Speaking of the wide receivers, this was a situation where it's hard to judge too much because you still have no Jordan Matthews out there, but we did see Nelson Agholor on back-to-back plays. You saw the high and you saw the low. You saw on the one play he makes a spectacular catch, moves the chains, next play drops the ball. On one hand, you feel like Nelson Agholor is getting better, but it seems like his progress is much more of a 2-step forward, 1-step back kind of deal.
Yeah, and despite that drop last night, obviously that's something that really can happen. But he definitely played better compared to week one, just in terms of the routes he was running, run blocking. Really every element of the game, I think, took a step forward for Nelson Agholor tonight or last night compared to the previous week. Climbing the ladder and making that catch, those are the types of plays that he's going to have to make opposite of Jordan Matthews this year to help out Sam Bradford to move the ball down the field. But I do agree, though, that Nelson Agholor, especially throughout training camp, he hasn't been a guy that really has played particularly poorly, at least in training camp, but he also hasn't been a guy that's really shown you much. It's almost been, I don't want to say indifferent, but you really haven't seen much at all from him, whether it's good or bad. So it's been kind of a weird situation with him. So I'm really curious how he plays in this next preseason game. He's going to have even more time with Sam Bradford. First-team offense will likely play more than they did these past 2 weeks. So Nelson Agholor, particularly if this Jordan Matthews injury, it seems pretty likely that he's going to miss the entire preseason. So what's his status going to be for week one? After he misses all this time, is he going to be fully ready to go? Is he going to be back to where he was in week one? So you definitely want to see Nelson Agholor continue to take some steps. Even though, as you said, sometimes it's two steps forward and 1 step back, he's still getting a little bit of ground, and you really want to see that as much as you can leading up to the regular season.
The guy who stood out to me of the wide receivers was Paul Turner. I mean, he's got 10 targets. He's gotten 9 of them. The one he didn't get was because Carson Wentz didn't throw it to him. And it seems like this guy catches everything in his radius. He's not the biggest guy in the world, Josh. He's not really tall. He's not super fast. But it seems like if you get the ball within reach of him, he's going to catch it.
Yeah, and that's something that he's shown over and over again, just the hands that he has. I mean, he's a guy that he's been impressive throughout training camp. So it's not like last night was the first time where he really impressed his coaches or we saw something from him for the first time. Every day at practice, you see him just, I know it sounds so simple and every wide receiver should be able to do this, but just he doesn't have a big problem with drops. He catches the ball, and unfortunately that's a problem that a lot of the other Eagles receivers have. So even though he is an undrafted free agent out of Louisiana Tech, I mean, he's making a strong case to make the 53-man roster, and if not, at least make the practice squad. I mean, Doug Peterson has talked highly of him for at least a week or two now, dating back toward the beginning of training camp. So Paul Turner is definitely a pretty good sleeper to make this final roster.
The two guys who I'm looking at right now who are just major disappointments to me are Chris Givens and Rueben Randle. I feel like Rueben Randle is just this massive letdown at this point. I mean, you were hoping the guy might come in here with a little bit of a fire to say, you know, I actually had a good season with the Giants last year. They let me walk, and I'm going to come in here and prove something. He hasn't really proved much, while Chris Givens, the more I watch and the more I feel like he's just a one-trick pony.
Yeah, and I mean, those are two guys where, I mean, if you want to locate two guys who could really be hurt by the Green Beckham trade, I think it's more so Rueben Randle, but it could also be Chris Givens. I mean, if you think about it, Jordan Matthews is obviously a lock to make the roster. Unless some unforeseen trade happens, you would think Nelson Agholor is going to make the roster. Josh Huff, I know Eagles fans aren't big fans of him, but the simple fact that he gives you something as your best kick returner is going to give him a roster spot. And so you have those three guys, and then after that, I mean, who else do you have? You know, maybe Green Beckham can take a spot. Maybe Paul Turner can. So adding another receiver to the mix is going to hurt guys like Givens and Rueben Randle, particularly Randle. I mean, if you think about it, in some ways, Dorial Green Beckham is a younger, more talented version than Rueben Randle. I mean, they both had people question their effort, their consistency, and those are two things that you really can't have, especially if you're Rueben Randle. He's a guy that follows him around in New York. His teammates, reporters, coaches, they all kind of said, well, how invested is he in this game? And when Rueben Randle arrived in Philadelphia, he said, no, I am. It's just that, you know, that's my personality and that's just the way I go about things. But as we saw in week one, the effort that he gave was not acceptable. And he's a guy that could definitely be on the outside looking in when final cuts are made.
And if I can just get back to your Josh Huff point, I'm glad you brought that up. I've heard a couple other guys bring that up today as well. You know, I look at Josh Huff as valuable because he's not just your best kick returner, but he's the guy that if something happens to Darren Sproles, he can do punt returns as well. He's a guy who can do the things on special teams that you need, and you need a guy who's the good backup.
Yeah, exactly. And I know Eagles fans don't want to hear that Josh Huff deserves a roster spot, but with the state of the receivers, he does. I mean, he's going to contribute more just as a starting kick returner and potentially as a guy that could contribute as a punt returner if something were to happen to Sproles or maybe even Kenyon Barner if he's not available. But your starting kick returner could definitely give you more than your fifth receiver who never sees the field. And even as a receiver, obviously he's had problems with drops. But one thing that I'm interested to see actually is how Doug Peterson tries to get the ball in Josh Huff's hands. Because one thing we've seen in practice that you haven't really seen much in games just because of how vanilla the play calling is. Obviously, you don't want to show much in the preseason, but they've been doing these jet sweeps where Josh Huff goes in motion and the center snaps the ball and the quarterback immediately gives it to Huff going in motion as just a handoff. And so I'm going to be interested to see how they try to get the ball in his hands outside of just, normal routes. Will they try to give him more screens? Will they try to get him in the backfield or handoffs? So that's one thing I'm curious to see is, are they just doing that in practice as something that, maybe they could do, or is that something they're actually planning to do once the regular season hits?
One more thing on the offense I wanted to ask you about. The more I watch these games, and obviously it's only 2 preseason games, but I'm getting the overwhelming feeling that it's not just going to be Ertz who's going to get a lot of targets this year. I think you're going to have Ertz and Selleck as 2 of the top 5 receivers in terms of receptions and yards and touchdowns this year, because it seems like it's not just this offense is good for tight ends, but the fact that it seems like Sam Bradford is comfortable throwing it to Ertz and Selleck.
Oh, yeah. I mean, most definitely. Zach Ertz and Jordan Matthews are clearly going to be the 2 focal points of this offense, and just by default, because the Eagles don't have that many other weapons, especially at receiver, it would not be surprising at all for Brent Selleck to get some red zone targets. I definitely anticipate Darren Sproles, the Eagles trying to get him involved, whether it's coming out of the backfield as a receiver or even lining up as a slot receiver. But a sleeper for you, Dorial Green-Beckham. I mean, obviously, he has to address the consistency issues and all the criticisms that Tennessee Titans head coach Mike Mularkey had of him. But the bottom line is this guy's talented. He's big. He has the size that you want. He is, just in terms of measurables and the ability that he has, the perfect red zone target. Now, obviously, he has to prove that he should be on the field. He needs to show up every day in practice to deserve that opportunity. But they put him in last night, his first play on a fade route. They put him in there for a reason. They're hoping that he can add something down there in the red zone, capitalize and turn, not just get field goals, but turn those into touchdowns. He's going to be one of the best shots you have at receiver to get those points down at the other opponent's end zone.
It's also helpful when you're 6'5.5" and you run a 4.40, right, Josh?
Exactly. I mean, that's why they brought him in. I mean, it doesn't. Obviously, there are reasonable concerns about the effort and the consistency, but no one really is going to deny the talent that he has. So if hopefully the trade serves as some type of a wake-up call, or maybe Greg Lewis, the Eagles wide receivers coach, can just get in his head, or Brian Dawkins, who the Eagles just added as a full-time football executive, maybe he can help out Green Beckham and get him on the right track. But he's a guy that they would definitely like to see as a big red zone target for Sam Bradford.
Well, if Brian Dawkins can't get you juiced and focused, I don't think anybody can at this point.
That is an excellent point. I completely agree with that.
Josh Hennig for Birds 24/7 over at PhillyMag.com. He's been joining us here on the Sports Bash. We have to wait a couple extra days, not just a week away. It's next Saturday. The Eagles play the Colts for their next preseason game. Josh, appreciate the time. Catch you next time.
Thanks for having me on.